All right, so this is Bob Englund, and I'm here with Phil Simpkins, the CEO of Arro Social. And we had a podcast that we worked on. It's actually a year ago, like this week, that we started it, right? And we got quite a bit through, and of course, COVID came around as we started putting it out to people. Yeah. Things have actually changed. We decided there was some technical difficulties in the filming and recording that we had. So we decided that the best thing to do was just let's back up and redo these next steps. So we've gone up to, right now we're working on the 7 habits. Yep. We've gone up to, we're on WinWin, okay? But what we've done so far, let me just go over a few things. We've talked about being proactive, which is the first one. Yep. We talked about begin with the end in mind. We did put first things first, and it was time for win-win. Win-win. And the truth is, as we talked through all these other, we kept bringing up win-win all the time because Arro Social is all about win-win.
Making sure there's fair opportunities and everybody's getting their fair chance and everybody wins.
Yeah, right? So the one big thing was that we talked about cultivation versus curation, and that seems to be probably one of the first big things about win-win, even though we talked about that in the proactive part.
Yes.
That was still, I mean, really, I think that was what we were doing all the time, right? Every single step along the way, we've been talking about how Arro Social is a win-win situation.
And we actually jokingly said it was a win-win-win, right?
Yeah.
For users, for influencers, for advertisers, and the company itself. Yeah. Right? So it was a win for everybody.
Yeah. So we need to go on with this win-win stuff, right? Now we're going to focus on what is the win-win part of it. And one of the things we first talked about when we were talking about the win-win part of it is that Arro Social is there for, its purpose is not to, as new people come in, it becomes harder and harder for new people to join, right? You see that on some of these bigger networks, YouTube, for instance.
Correct.
The first people who were the big YouTubers, although some of them, of course, have fallen away because of just
or even the latest,
like that, right?
The most popular now says she was original YouTuber.
Yeah.
Right? And so we want to make sure that everybody has the same opportunity.
Yeah.
Whether they started first, whether they just came on, whether they spend a lot of time, whether they have a lot of videos, not as many videos, but basically make sure that everybody has the same opportunity.
Yeah.
And that it is a win for everybody, right?
Yeah.
The win-win for all the players on the network. And so in order to do that, we need to, one, be transparent, right? We need to tell everybody what we're doing and what we want to accomplish. And then we need to put ourselves in the other people's place, right? Use the other 7 habits to understand what people want out of their social networks, out of their agreements, partnerships, and all that. So in order to win for multiple parties, it needs to be fair for everybody whenever they start. And so we've tried to create this environment where we're listening to the users, we're getting their feedback, and then defining what they want to accomplish. And in those negotiations and considerations, then basically put it in the arena where the company benefits by getting its I guess expenses paid for, right? Because sadly everything costs money. So you need to make sure that the expenses are paid for. And then once you accomplish that, then you need to be looking for getting the best value back to the user or the influencer, right? Because in everything that I've ever talked to, everybody wants more money, more value. There's not too many people that just say, here, have everything, right? But that's literally what most social networks are asking you to do, right? Give us everything and we'll give you nothing back in return, right? That's not a fair trade-off. There's no way that's close to win-win. Because if you're giving everything and getting nothing in return, that's an operational discord, right? Which is talked about in some of the books that we've read. And Who Owns the Future by Jerome Lanier. And basically he's talking about it's fair to charge some fees, but you need to give back the ownership and the money and the profit back to the people that are generating it, which is basically the influencers. Right?
No.
The influencers are giving you a product. They need to be earning something back from it.
Yeah.
And all these social networks that are not giving anything in return, people wonder what the product is. The reality is you are the product. Right?
Yeah.
If you don't know where the product is, then it's you.
Yeah.
Right? And
When you think everything is free,
Yeah,
it's because you're the one that's
because-
being sold.
Correct. You're the one that's being sold.
Yes.
The product is being sold, and you're giving it away for free.
Yeah.
And it's going to cost something.
Mm-hmm.
It may not cost a lot, right? It may not, you may not think that it has value, but YouTube has taught us that it does, right?
Yeah.
It obviously has value. There is obviously money in that, and it should be given to you at the best value return for your time, development, input, and all that. Along with that, we can't guarantee how much, right? We can guarantee our percentage, and we can work towards lowering our expenses, but we can't guarantee that we're going to make everybody millionaires, right? That's just not how it works. There are things that are involved, but that becomes part of, like, WinWin is a negotiation value and proposition, right? But win-win is that you understand what the other person wants and what they wanted, what value they want out of that conversation, right? And the conversation is not one way. It is not, as a customer, you get everything that you're coming in asking for, right? And as a business, we don't get everything that we're talking about or want out of that negotiation. It's a balance of understanding of what each of those individuals on that side of the negotiation is receiving. And so if it's one-sided, it's just wrong.
Yeah.
It's not a negotiation, it's whatever, right? I hesitate to use the word hostage or violent or thievery, but it kind of is, right?
Making yourself a platform for creative people to express themselves, and this is exactly how they try to pass it off. It's a place where you can express yourself and show your views, blah, 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 blah. But creative people, it takes time and money and effort for them to do that.
Yes.
And whenever you're making money off of the people watching them, it's wrong not for them to have part of that.
Correct.
Exactly, right? That's what we're all about,
Then the
right?
question becomes how much.
Yeah.
Right? YouTube is answering the question of whatever we want to pay you, right? That's how YouTube's, we'll tell you that we're treating you fairly, but there's no evidence.
But if we feel, if our board feels that we're not making enough money off of you, then we're gonna, where are we gonna make our money by cutting how much we pay?
We give you, putting on limit restrictions.
Yeah, creating that if you don't get at least
right.
this many views, we don't pay you anything at all. Correct. Yeah, so until
And
we're really making money off of you.
Even though you earn $9, Mr. Simpkins, we're not going to pay you because we changed our limits, right?
You need to make this much
Yeah.
before we'll pay you anything, and everything that before that is gone.
It's gone. It's zeroed, right? Does that sound fair?
No.
Right? So
And of course it
to me,
wasn't
that
that way.
isn't fair. Right?
That's not how it started out.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't sign an agreement for that, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, you sent me an agreement and said this is what we're going to do, and I said okay, right?
Yeah.
And then they went and changed it on it.
And you change the agreement and say if you want to keep
Yeah.
going, you have to keep agreeing to our
Right.
agreement. Yeah.
Yes. And so does that sound like win-win? Right?
No.
The reality is no. There's
Yeah.
no way that's anywhere close to win-win,
Yeah.
right? So we put ourselves in that equation and say, what does sound like win-win, right? So one, we have expenses. Let's figure out a model that understands expenses, and like nonprofit seems like the best way to do that. You figure out averages, right? And the average tech company makes 25% profit if they're selling a commodity, right? And then some only make 15%. And so somewhere in the middle, 20% sounds like a fair, right? nonprofits operate that way. That seemed like a good target zone to define, like, let's limit our expenses, let's share this. This seems like a fair, equitable exchange. And so that's what we set it at, right? 20% profit, limit our expenses, and give that back to the user. Again, recognizing, like, users are doing something, right? Not many other social networks even honor or recognize that the users are doing something.
Yeah.
They're building their networks. They're reading the posts. They're viewing the posts. They are contributing to the community. So the users need to get something for performing their actions, right? It is recognized that influencers are obviously the key role and the product of any social network. So the influencers should get a larger portion of any revenue profit that's coming into the company. And so the model that we established is 20% to the company, 20% to the users, and then the rest of the 60% of the profit going back to the influencers, since they are doing the lion's share of the job. And what we've seen from the evidence of YouTube, that 60% is even higher than what YouTube pays out from any of the evidence and the information that we've gotten from YouTube users. And so we want to try to maintain that, right? 60% sounds fair. It's the highest of the industry leader. And so we want to build on that for the influencer, the user, and us as the network itself, right? Now, there's then several other entities at play, right? So do you make a decision of how do you make your money as a network? And the best model out there is the industry leader, right? The best model is actually Facebook. Now, they're not implementing it correctly, but it's still a good model. The model is advertisement, right? Or sponsorship, or some type of mechanism of money coming into the system. And then you've got to figure out how to share it, right? Facebook isn't sharing it. They're taking it and then figuring out what they want to do with it. That is not a win-win situation either, right? So we've stated our win-win for the influencer, the user, and the company. Now we need to define the win-win for the advertising companies. And the win-win for them is then, like, not be secret or tell them what percentages they're accessing, right? But really give them who they're talking to, let them see what they're interacting with, right? And actually give them the information of who's interacting with their product, potentially some whys, and then of course the demographics that go along with all that. So that, and I've also never seen a company in the world that wants to pay a high price, right? So nobody wants to pay really high expensive prices to get anything, and so then make it as reasonable as the advertisement that you see on Facebook, as reasonable as the advertisements you see on YouTube and Google, and then basically set up the profit definition to the influencers and the users, right? That to us creates this fair win-win-win for every player in the system, limiting your expenses, expensing the direction, and operating in that manner consistently and as clearly as we can.
Okay. So that's our win-win, right? We have actually, I think we have win,
Yes.
win, win-win.
Yes.
Right? So
We're trying, right?
we have the company, of course, wants to win. So that's why we start a company. We have a platform where content creators, influencers can really win more than they could elsewhere, right? We have a place where users win, where they're, instead of just being the product, they're actually, their data has value and we're paying them for their data.
Yep.
And of course we know that those users aren't just they aren't just someone watching. They're also, they're bringing friends on, right?
Yes.
They're saying, hey, come on this, and then their friends are on there because of them.
Correct.
And maybe that won't be a big part of our network where people are like tons of it, but we don't know, right?
Yeah.
That's how people grow.
You need to be fair. You need to bring people on board.
And then our advertisers win because they have a really verifiable, this is where your money's going. This is where it actually went. It's real. It's not.
Yes.
We've
not
talked
fake.
about.
It's not hidden at the bottom, right?
Yeah.
It has to be clicked on and viewed, and then that charge is actually still a fair charge. Right?
Yeah, and even because of the way we share and stuff like that, and there's KYCs like that, so you're not going to have, not that somebody couldn't create a click farm or something like that, then, but at least for the most part, that's not going to happen. Right?
Correct. Yeah,
it's not profitable for them to be doing that.
Because we have the know your customer, so they have their user identity, and they actually have those connections.
Yeah. So that's the 7 habits of highly effective people. Win-win. On our next episode, we're going to be talking about seek first to understand and then to be understood. Bye.
Have a great one.